Your fantasy matchups are starting to become crucial, whether you're fighting for a bye, a playoff spot, or you're just trying to avoid a league punishment, which me and Ty would know nothing about. But we are here to bring you a winning recipe for this week to put you in position for whatever you need coming up. Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. It is me, Cameron Lawrence, with my esteemed colleague, our draft guru, Mr. Tyler Plath. Tyler, give us the word of the day.
The word of the day is that we have one game this week where it can be simplified to one team very good, one team very bad. We can move on. But then there's some other good, sneaky good matchups. So I'm excited to break it all down. But yeah, the word of the day, be very good at the football and be very good at the fantasy football.
There we go. That's what we like to see. And we know you're very good at the fantasy football if you're listening right now. And we don't want you to miss any more of our content because we got so much for you. So make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube, hit up those notifications. If you're on the audio podcast, go over to YouTube, do that as well. And if you're on the audio podcast, subscribe or follow us on there, subscribe, whatever the button says. I know it says different across all of them. You know what I'm talking about. Hit that button and then keep on listening because we got a jam-packed episode, just like we do every single Thursday for you guys with the start sits from every single week 11 matchup. So Ty, let's not waste any more of the people's time and let's jump right in. Alrighty, we don't quite have the same caliber of teams on bye this week as we did last week. We're going to put all the good teams on bye in week 10, then we're going to put Atlanta, Indianapolis, New Orleans, and New England on bye in week 11. I guess New England's the only really bad team in there, but not quite Miami, Philly, Kansas City, and who's the Rams.
The Rams, right?
Rams are kind of like the odd team out, but hey, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. So for fantasy wise.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the inverse, right? I mean, Indy, New England, Atlanta, not very good. New Orleans is probably the best out of there. One good team, three bad teams, and last week, three good teams, one bad team. That's harsh, but you know what I mean.
I don't think you're wrong. But we're going to start with Thursday Night Football, which, thank the Lord, is a lot better than what we saw last week with Chicago and Carolina. The NFL was making the schedule. It's like, well, we need a bad one, so let's put a good one next. So they give us Cincy at Baltimore in this one. The obvious starters here: Burrow, Chase, T. Higgins was ruled out in this game. Something to keep an eye on. Joe Mixon, Lamar Jackson, and Mark Andrews, of course. Tyler, we're going to start with one of the burning questions that some people have. Which Baltimore running back do I go with now? Do I stay with Gus Edwards, who's been pretty sturdy as of late, putting in scoring, or do I go with a young, exciting Keaton Mitchell, promise larger workload? Which direction do you want to go with there, Ty?
Well, we know what the roles are really for these two backs. Mm-hmm. Gus Edwards is going to take early down and goal line work, and Keaton Mitchell is just kind of, I don't know if we can necessarily label him change of pace, but he's really going to take everything else. So it's a matter of, which format probably, which, it's pretty straightforward. If you get credit for receiving work, you probably want to go with Keaton Mitchell, even if it is just a catch or two. It still matters. And especially when he's a big play threat, like we saw last week when he only had 4 touches, 2 touches, and he still turned in like 60 something total yards. I think the point I'm trying to make is that I don't really see touchdown upside for Gus Edwards this week. So if you are in this situation where you have both of these guys, I would lean Keaton Mitchell. And I don't know exactly how much of a promise this was from John Harbaugh, but he did say that Keaton Mitchell is going to be a little more involved this week. So my leaning is towards Keaton Mitchell, but at the same time, like Gus Edwards has been a pretty reliable back, and we don't want to say that touchdowns are a sticky stat, but he's been scoring. Even when it doesn't make sense for him to score, he has been. So maybe the best way to say it, it's a coin flip, but my personal, I personally lean Keaton Mitchell.
Yeah. And I think it really comes down to what do you need in your offense, right? Or what do you need in your fantasy team? At this point, you know your fantasy team pretty well. You know if you've got a whole bunch of guys who could be lightning in the bottle where you need, a steady, like Gus is probably going to get you 8 points, at minimum. Whereas, Keaton Mitchell, there is a floor of 0, right? He could come out, have 4 carries, get you 5 yards, and that's it. Gus feels like he has a little more of a, strong floor. So if that's all you want for sure points, Gus. But if you really want that lightning in the bottle, a lot of people are trying to say he's the next Devon Achane. I don't quite believe that, right? It's a very different offense, very different caliber. Like I think Devon Achane, he was was he a day 2 pick, right?
Day 2 pick, yep.
Yeah. And so, I do think it's a little bit different there. But at the same time, we've seen it the last 2 weeks. He can explode and rip off these big plays. So he's very exciting there. Throwing the ball wise, we saw it last week on the Cincy side. T. Higgins out, so you start Tyler Boyd. But I shouldn't say you start Tyler Boyd, but I think he's a startable option. I think he's going to be in that wide receiver 3 range. He could be a good flex option. Staying on the Baltimore side of the ball, though, Zay Flowers, he's an interesting one this season, right? As he feels like a guy that we always want to say start, but it's, feels kind of 50-50. Where are you at on Zay Flowers this week, Ty?
I am actually kind of out on Zay Flowers this week, but I realize that, you may be in a point this season where you do kind of have to rely on Zay Flowers. But personally, if I've got the choice, I don't really want to play him. Because even though you look at stats and metrics and stuff, and you will see that Cincinnati, is allowing the second most fantasy points to wide receivers the last 2 weeks. And you're like, well, that bodes well for Zay Flowers. But the problem is that they are also allowing the highest yards per reception per game the last 2 weeks over that stretch. I repeated myself, whatever.
We know what you mean. Now we doubly know what you mean.
So what that tells me is that they've gotten beat by the big play.
Mm-hmm.
And they also, they don't allow many receptions. That's the other part of this. So you're not getting a volume play with Zay Flowers. You're kind of dependent on a big play for Zay Flowers. And he has shown that he can be a big play every once in a while. So my question really I then have to ask myself, do I think Zay Flowers can hit on a big play?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I don't think so in a divisional matchup. And I know that he caught there was like the 50-yard pass that he caught in against them. I don't see that happening again. So personally for me, I don't think Zay Flowers is a start if I had him on my roster, but I can understand an argument to start him just based on what we've seen the past couple of weeks from Cincinnati. I don't buy it. You can. That's okay. I just wouldn't.
Yeah, for sure. It's a hard one, but like you said, I would probably put him in that Tyler Boyd range, so that wide receiver 3-ish this week. Moving on to another AFC North divisional matchup, we have maybe one of the grossest from a fantasy perspective. Pittsburgh at Cleveland. Deshaun Watson out for the season, announced today. People have mixed reactions to that, to say the least. We'll leave it at that, though. Ty, you got on our doc, and I agree with you. Are there any obvious starts besides maybe Deontay? And it's not exactly a great matchup for Deontay. I'm going to go down the list real quick and just so the listener knows, these are all the players that you might be considering. You got Dorian Thomas, DTR, Jerome Ford. I'm the worst with names. It's ridiculous. Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt, Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Kenny Pickett, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, who are apparently Jalen Warren's a starter now, George Pickens, Deontay Johnson. Now you throw Pat Freiermuth back in the mix. Ty, is there anyone that you're confident in this game?
No, straight up no. Like, you would think Deontay, just being leading receiver in Pittsburgh, is going to have to throw the ball at some point. The matchup doesn't. Cleveland shuts down teams. They shut down teams, and I know they just gave up 31 to Baltimore, but it wasn't through the air. Mm-hmm. So
I think Jerome Ford I'd put in that.
That's the only one I would consider, but I feel like Pittsburgh also. It's it's Pittsburgh on the road. Never mind. Yeah, Jerome Ford, great start, great start. But like Kareem Hunt, I know Mari Cooper, not with DTR. And Njoku has been a lot better recently, but it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson at this point. So no. And then you look at Pittsburgh Steelers weapons, not Freiermuth coming back. Again, like it's the Cleveland Browns. I'm not, and like Jalen Warren has been nice the past couple of weeks. Don't trust it this week. It's really, it is quite honestly just Jerome Ford, and you're really going to have to make me a good argument to start Deontay Johnson even this week.
Yeah, I mean, so I like Deontay Johnson. I still think he's a low-end wide receiver 2. That's just because I like the talent. But obviously, I mean, it's a scary start. Like I'm not confident if I am in my lineup. George Pickens, I'm probably staying away from. Najee and Jalen Warren, if you really want to try to pick the right one in a bad matchup, I mean, all the power to you, but that's not for me. Like you got to put on some steel underpants if you're going to be doing that. So
I just realized I've got Deontay as my wide receiver 20 on the week. So actually, I'm right where you are, low end wide receiver 2. So yes, you are playing him, but you're
not excited.
Exactly.
Like you're not expecting 20 points. You're like, okay, Deontay, go get me your 5 and 70 or 6 and 60, and let's call it good. And I'll get 12 points out of you. That's kind of what you're hoping for, Deontay.
Exactly.
This next matchup could have some little more fireworks, and games that have Miami tend to do that. It's Las Vegas at the Miami Dolphins. You got to start Jacobs and Adams on the Raiders side, and then on the Dolphins side, you're starting Tua. You're starting Mostert. Achane is supposed to be back. It's not official yet, but it sounds like he's playing. We would start both. And then Tyreek and Waddle, you're obviously starting. Which, anytime those play, all those Mostert, Achane, Tyreek, and Waddle are in a game, there could be a lot of points put up. We're not a ton of players outside of that are, fantasy relevant besides, I guess, Jacoby Myers, Ty. What are we making of Jacoby Myers? Been a rough little stretch, but what do we make of him going into this game?
Yes, it's been a rough little stretch, but I don't think it's a stretch. I feel like it's the norm for him now at this point. Aiden O'Connell is his quarterback. It's affected Devontae Adams. It's affecting Jacoby Myers. And the only wide receiver that you're really going to play is Devontae Adams at this point, in my opinion, at least. Since O'Connell was named the starter and since Antonio Pierce took over as the head coach, Jacoby Myers only has 4 receptions, 7 targets, 59 yards. He had a 13-point week. It was because he scored on a 17-yard reverse. Jacoby Myers is really a non-factor at this point, at least through 2 games. So I will give him space to bounce back, but I don't think this is the matchup for it when Miami, coming off of their bye week, has been middle of the pack against wide receivers, and now they have Jalen Ramsey back in the mix. I really don't think this is the game for Jacoby Myers, and you're still going to look at him and go, well, he's the wide receiver 20-something on the year, so like he should still be okay. I don't think so. Yeah. I really don't think so.
Yeah, no, I would agree. It's tough sled, and you look at this offense. Aiden O'Connell, when he gets, any pressure, he just wants to chuck it deep. Like, right? He's a one read, I want to chuck it, which favors Devontae more, not necessarily his game. And if they're going to feed anyone targets, they're going to make sure they get targets. It's going to be Devontae Adams, right, over Jacoby Myers. And you think about it too, Jacoby Myers was a Josh McDaniels guy, right? I think it felt like McDaniels brought him in strictly because McDaniels wanted him. Not to say like the team's out at him. Oh, you're connected to McDaniels, we hate you. But I do think that factors into why he was getting more targets, why he's getting less targets now.
Let's do a quick name game just to show how ugly a Jacoby Myers start is.
Are we doing just this week or rest of the season?
Let's just do this week.
All right.
We'll keep it simple. Let's start with Tyler Boyd with T. Higgins out now. Tyler Boyd or Jacoby Myers?
I'm going Tyler Boyd there.
Tyler Boyd. Zay Flowers.
There goes Zay.
Tyler Lockett.
I think I'm going to go Lockett after what we've been seeing the last couple of weeks from Lockett.
How about Amari Cooper with DTR?
I got to go Amari. Go Amari.
And a couple more now. Chris Godwin.
Ooh, I think I'm going to go Godwin.
But that's where we're talking, right?
Yes.
Like ugly volume. Cortland Sutton.
This one's gross, and this one's tough.
Yeah.
I think I might lean Sutton, though. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I would too. And the last one for you, unless you want to do two more, but I'll do one for sure.
Up to you.
Jordan Addison. If Jefferson plays.
Yeah, I'm going to go Jordan Addison. If I'm picking an offense, which I think is going to score more points, it's going to be the Vikings.
And last one then, our good friend, Calvin Ridley.
Ooh. If I'm picking upside, I'm going to go Ridley. I'm probably going to go Ridley there. Yeah, man, that's gross. Those are some disgusting names.
Yep, and that's just how it feels if you're going to start Jacoby Myers.
For sure,
it's just gross.
For sure. Alrighty, this is the week of divisional matchups. Is this like everybody's in a divisional matchup? We got Chicago at Detroit next. Sorry, I'm talking about the Chicago-Detroit game. I wasn't talking about. I understand Vegas and Miami are not in the same division.
Wait a second.
I know if we leave it, I'm going to get a comment on it.
Someone is going to drop it.
Miami aren't in the same conference.
Yeah, 3 in the ... after 2. Yes, we know.
It sounds like Justin Fields is back. Woohoo! All right. You can decide how you feel. But that probably means you should be starting DJ Moore, who you've been starting all along. Cole Kmet. You're starting David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Those guys are on the same with us. Amon St. Brown and I think Sam Laporta. I think all 4 of them, no matter what, are locked in. I would say DJ Moore's close to that, but not quite on the same level. We're going to actually dissect the quarterback battle in this game, and then we're going to dissect the Bears running backs. Ty, I'll let you decide. Which one do we want to start with first here?
Let's start with the Bears running backs, because I think there's an important update that happened on the day that we recorded this that is worth diving into.
Well, why don't you hit us with it?
So hit us. Are you sure about that? No, it was reported on Wednesday afternoon from ESPN that Chicago has no plans to favor one running back over the others.
Oh, gross.
Gross. So it sounds like a 3-headed, hot-handed backfield. That's what it sounds like to me. And that report came out without the confirmation, but with the pretty certain speculation that Khalil Herbert is going to return this week. He practiced in full before week 10, wasn't activated for whatever reason, figures to be activated for week 11. So again, now you're looking at Khalil Herbert, you're looking at Deonta Foreman, and you're looking at Roschon Johnson. Do you just sit them all this week just to see what it looks like?
I would. I mean, I still am under the belief that the best running back in this offense is Justin Fields. So you're fighting for the second best runner, and you don't know who it's going to be. I don't want anything to do with it.
Now, here's the thing, though. Detroit, they are allowing the 7th most fantasy points to running backs over the last 4 weeks. They're middle of the pack in rushing yards per game, but they're averaging a rushing touchdown a game.
Flipping the script from last year. They're going good to bad now.
Exactly. So again, I'm with you though. I am sitting Bears running backs this week because I need to see what it looks like, even with a good matchup like this against Detroit, which is kind of frustrating because when there are some other ugly running back matchups this week, right? We said don't start Najee, don't start Jalen Warren, Gus Edwards, is iffy. Keaton Mitchell himself, iffy because he's just got such a low floor. Like you wish for running backs like on a team like Chicago to emerge, but that report doesn't help anything in my opinion.
No, it doesn't. And then we got the quarterbacks. I think this is another interesting one to talk about, right? Jared Goff has been consistently pretty good. I mean, this season. And they are at home. That is something dating back to last year that's been important, very important. And then Justin Fields, we know how good he has been, or he can be, but we also know how thumb injuries can affect a quarterback in the middle of the season. So, Ty, if you had to pick one of the two, which one would you lean in this game?
Oh, man. I'm probably going to say Jared Goff. I'm going to sacrifice the rushing upside of a guy like Justin Fields and just bet on the better offense. Even if I think Detroit can just, put up like 300 rushing yards between Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs on Chicago, I'm still going to bet on Jared Goff. It feels like the safer, more, because I think the other way to look at it is this. What is the upside for Justin Fields this week? Like, what is the max that he could put up coming back from his thumb injury, healthy backfield? So what is his rushing? Like, there's too many question marks for me with Justin Fields to have confidence enough to put him over Jared Goff.
No, I would agree. And we've seen 2 different Justin Fields already this season. The beginning it was terrible. And then he had a couple of good games against Washington and Denver. But it's what Justin Fields are you going to get? And then on top of that, how much is the injury going to affect him? So I would agree, taking the consistency that Jared Goff has been against in a plus matchup for him, I would call it.
Yeah. And there is a narrative out there that Chicago has been playing better against quarterbacks ever since Matt Eberflus took over the play calling. And they have. I mean, I shouldn't say they have definitively. It really depends on the matchup. They either allow a opposing quarterback to throw more than 300 yards or less than 230, and there's no in between.
For sure.
And I think Jared Goff would classify as one of the better quarterbacks and would have have a better possibility of going over 300 than under 230.
Definitely. Alrighty. Next we got Tennessee at Jacksonville. We're keeping this divisional matchup string going. In this game, King Henry, got to start him. We'll talk about him a little bit later, a little foreshadowing for the people. Travis Etienne, he's running back 3 on the year. You got to keep starting him. Christian Kirk, we've talked about, pretty much every week. We feel like at this point he's earned that, should be in your lineup. Probably a Deontay-ish area, right around that wide receiver 20. And then Evan Ingram as well. I was looking at Evan Ingram's stats, and he's been very good from a volume standpoint, just hasn't found the end zone so far this year. Not something I would quite bank on, to happen for the rest of the year. So maybe a potential buy low opportunity if you're looking for a tight end. I'm just going to throw that out there. But we're going to talk about the Jags side of the ball here because we don't care about the Titans. And we tried to talk good about them last week, and Mailman did not come through for us. So we're going to just not talk about him right now. But we're going to talk about a quarterback wide receiver duo on the other side of the ball. Ty, let's start with the wide receiver here, Mr. Calvin Ridley. We wanted to try to start him last week, and he went, no, it's not happening. So what do you make of Calvin Ridley this week?
I like him again this week, and
fooled me once.
Yeah, right. That is exactly what it is. Look, over the last 4 weeks, it really comes down to the matchup. Tennessee's allowing the 9th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers out wide, and we've talked about this extensively. Guess who lines up out wide? Calvin Ridley. Tennessee's allowing the 10th most fantasy points in general to wide receivers per game, the 11th most receptions and yards per game. I like the matchup checks out for me. But I think what this comes down to is, can you really start 2 Jaguars wide receivers and Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk, but then call Trevor Lawrence a sit? And I don't really know how to feel about it because I feel like sitting Trevor Lawrence this week. Last 4 weeks, Tennessee's allowing the 12th fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, and they're middle of the pack in passing yards per game. And Lawrence himself, since week 2, has only 2 finishes inside the top 12. And he squeaked in, like barely made it in. He was the quarterback 10 and quarterback 11. His highest point total since week 2. Want to take a guess?
Not good. I know that.
18. Decent. Ooh. But like when you're talking Trevor Lawrence with the weapons that he has.
Highest? Yeah.
Yeah. That should be higher. His average since week 2. You want to take a guess at that?
Oh, gosh. His high at 15.
Lower.
14.
Yuck. Yeah, like it's not startable. It's not startable. So if you're not starting Trevor Lawrence, can you really start 2 Jaguars wide receivers then? And the preference for us is Christian Kirk because he's been the most consistent between him and Calvin Ridley. So while the matchup presents itself well for Calvin Ridley, can you start Calvin Ridley then too?
No. That is a tough question. I'm not going to answer because I don't want to. And it's disgusting. I just want
we'll let you, whoever you are listening, you can decide. We'll pose the question. You can decide.
So Trevor Lawrence is averaging 13.8 points. I want to put it into perspective. Quarterbacks last week who scored over 14 points. We have Mr. Russell Wilson, Baker Mayfield, Jordan Love, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, Zach Wilson, and Tommy DeVito scored more than 14 points.
DeVito scored more than that?
That shows you the bar that 14 points is, right? That is not a high bar. 18 quarterbacks did it all last week. So 14, averaging 14 for a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who you were excited about when as the quarterback 8 on the season. Yeah, that's not pretty at all. We'll move on though to this Chargers Green Bay game.
Division match. I'm kidding.
You had me for a second. I was like,
oh, really?
What am I missing here? Justin Herbert, you start. Keenan Allen, you start. Austin Eckler, you start. Very easy. On the other side of the ball, I don't know if Aaron Jones has made it back to obvious start. I have him as the start of the week in this one. Chargers giving up the third most receiving yards to running backs, I think, on the season. They've been a little more stingy against, running backs running the ball, but if you have Aaron Jones, right, you're banking on that receiving work. Yes, he's been getting more carries. He's played almost 60% of snaps and has had 4 receptions in each of the last 3 games, right? So he's regaining that RB1 role in this offense as he gets healthy again. He didn't look great last week. He had 13 carries. He had 20 carries the week before, which was kind of surprising for Aaron Jones. But I would bank on him kind of starting to get it going again in this one, especially in the receiving game, because would assume that Herbert and Keenan and Eckler kind of put up points, although it is in Green Bay. So we'll see. You never know what the weather could be like, if it could be if it's a chilly one or if it warms up. I'm not in the upper Midwest anymore, so I don't have to deal with that. So I don't know what it's like. But yeah, I would bank on Aaron Jones kind of bouncing back up high. I don't know what your thoughts are on Aaron Jones for this week, though.
I don't mind Aaron Jones this week. Ever since he came back from his injury, he's really dominated the line share of touches. At least he's in a 60-40 split in terms of rushing attempts. He's been getting 5 targets, 4 receptions in each of the last 3 games. If there is a Packers running back to choose, it is definitely Aaron Jones. The Chargers have been better against the run this year, or better against the run recently. So it's not like this is a smash start for Aaron Jones, but right. But with the touches that he's getting, it still warrants a start for Aaron Jones
for sure. And then the sit is I would sit the Chargers wide receivers in this one. Right. Last week we saw Jalen Guyton put up 4 and a touchdown. Quentin Johnson put up 4 and a touchdown. I wouldn't get cute in this matchup. Packers are allowing the 4th fewest points to wide receivers on the season. If there's been one thing they're good at, it's kind of been slowing down the pass, even when the offense hasn't looked great. And, if you're banking on these guys scoring in back-to-back weeks, I wouldn't, right? If you take away their touchdowns last week, Guyton had 8 and Quentin Johnson had 7. So, that's probably what you could expect again this week. I don't know, Ty, would you take a chance on either of those wide receivers in this one?
No, now that Jalen Guyton is back in the fold, which is going to sound crazy, but it matters. Quentin Johnson and Jalen Guyton ran the same amount of routes. And I don't know if that is they were in a close game against Detroit, so maybe it was warranted to run 3 wide receiver sets. But it at least casts enough of a cloud to not make me feel uneasy about, starting either one of Quentin Johnson or Jalen Guyton. And you're not starting Jalen Guyton ever. Don't make that mistake. This is more so about Quentin Johnson. This isn't the game for him this week.
For sure. Alrighty. And then I just forgot how to talk there. Our last matchup before we take a quick break, we got Arizona at Houston. It looks to be a barn burner. Actually should be decent on the Houston end. They've been playing pretty well as of late, and that's leading you to for sure starting Stroud. Do you consider Nico Collins and Tank Dell starts or for sure starts this week, Ty?
I do.
I think I would too. I think they've been playing well, especially Tank Dell with the volume he's been getting. It's been ridiculous. Nico's been consistent. Dalton Schultz, you have to start. James Conner, you're starting this week for sure. We mentioned it. Ty mentioned it just before we kicked off. Michael Carter did sign with the Cardinals, but I wouldn't expect him to really mix it in this week on such a short week. Hollywood and Trey McBride, you are also starting. Ty, I want to talk about the quarterback though that's not named CJ Stroud. This one, Mr. Kyler Murray, in his first game back, quarterback 13, 9 of 32 for 249 and threw an interception, but he still ran the ball right 6 times, 33 yards, and he did score a touchdown. He also lost a touchdown to Clayton Tune on a quarterback sneak in this one. So he's just interesting. I mean, maybe they're just don't want him to get hurt or something. I don't know, but. Are you starting Kyler now after what we saw last week?
Yeah, I am. I think that this game can be kind of similar to what we saw last week between Arizona and Atlanta. I know that Houston has been pulling off some pretty impressive wins lately. I'm still not super convinced by them. I feel like because in football circles, there is a lot of pro CJ Stroud commentary, and don't get me wrong, he's been playing phenomenally. But to the extent of putting him in the MVP conversation, I think that's a little overdone. I feel like it really is just because he's a rookie, and the mystique of a rookie quarterback doing this well is what is creating the narrative. I truly think that this game could be like the Arizona-Atlanta game last week, where it is high 20s in scoring, but there's tons of yards to be had for both teams. So I like Kyler Murray. He showed enough for me. I mean, 250 yards on 19 completed passes tells me that they're getting the ball down the field quite a bit. And if he's going to run the ball like he did, where he picked up 33 yards and he did find the end zone, I feel like that's enough for me.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I was going to quick look at, all right. Our next couple of players we're going to talk about is this Devin Singletary, Dameon Pierce mix. You have it on the dock. I didn't have to look at it, but I was looking up at Pierce practice today. He did not. So that does make it very interesting. Devin Singletary, obviously, week 10 played really well, right? He was running back 3. He had 30 rush attempts. 30 rush attempts, which is crazy because CJ Stroud threw the ball 39 times. They're running the ball, or they had, over 70 plays this game. He had 150 yards and a touchdown. Ty, what are you doing with this Texans backfield? Because it's a decent matchup.
It is a decent matchup. Arizona's allowing some of the most fantasy points to running backs on the year. They're allowing the most rushing touchdowns per game. Like they're averaging like 1.5 almost. So it's pretty much, I shouldn't say a lock, but there's a good chance that a running back can find the end zone against the Cardinals. I think what this really comes down to is if Dameon Pierce plays or not. If he doesn't play, I think Devin Singletary is a great start. But if Dameon Pierce does play, I'm more hesitant to play either one of them just because, Singletary did, what he did last week as a running back 3 without Dameon Pierce in the lineup. So maybe it is another one of those, got to see what this backfield looks like, because in my opinion, Devin Singletary has done enough to get the lion's share of touches and snaps.
Yeah.
Can't confirm that that's going to be the actual reality, though.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Dameon Pierce has not looked great over this entire season. I'm trying to pull. I mean, he actually has less fantasy points on the season. On MPP. Wow. He has less than 100 fantasy, 8 fantasy points a game this season from Dameon Pierce.
Oh, no.
3 yards per carry.
We tried to tell you. In
one game, Devin Singletary had half as many rushing yards as Dameon Pierce has on the season. Dameon Pierce has 327 on the season. Singletary had 150 this last game.
Yikes.
So, yeah, it's not great. So, should Singletary probably get more carries? got to assume after this week. And it still remains to be seen if Dameon Pierce even plays. But with that, let's transition into, I would say, some more fun matchups. But this next matchup we're going to talk about after the break isn't quite so fun. But we will transition into a word from our friends over at Underdog.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100.
We are back, and we are talking Dallas and Carolina, and this might be one of the fastest we've ever talked about a game. You are starting Dak. You are starting Tony Pollard still, especially against a bad Carolina rush defense. You are starting CeeDee Lamb, and you got to continue to start Jake Ferguson. And on the other side, it's not a great matchup, but we would still start Adam Thielen. The only other guy really in this entire game who was even worth considering talking about, Chuba Hubbard. Ty, you starting Hubbard this week?
Nope. No, this whole game can be summed up like this. Dallas defense, very good. Carolina offense, very bad.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like it's going to be a repeat of what we saw last week in the Giants Cowboys game. Cowboys defense, if there's no way they're on your waivers, but if they are, I would go get them. I wouldn't trade. I wouldn't tell you to trade for a defense, but if you're making a trade and you're just like looking for someone to throw on there, I mean, Cowboys defense might not be a bad one this week for sure.
Can I just throw this out there?
I would love it.
Would you trade Dameon Pierce for the Dallas defense?
Yes.
Oh no.
Dallas defense might at least win me a week. Pierce just going to sit on my bench. All right. We will keep it in the NFC East as we move on for what
division matchup
be a barn burner between the Giants and the Commanders. The obvious starts in here: Saquon, Terry McLaurin, and that's it. There is not a lot of obvious starts. Maybe the quarterback, though, for the Washington Commanders is starting to get close. He has been surprising, to say the least. He is the quarterback 3 on the season right now. Does help. Obviously, the Commanders have not had a bye yet, but averaging more points per game than Lamar Jackson right now, 0.8 points less per game than Patrick Mahomes, 0.1 less points per game than Tua Tagovailoa. Mr. Sam Howell, Ty, is he got to be kind of locked into your lineup moving forward?
Well, before you trade him, yes.
Ooh.
Can I just say this real quick?
I would love it.
He is an easy sell candidate for me.
Ooh.
He gets a bye in week 14.
Mm-hmm.
First game is right back in fantasy playoffs in week 15.
Ooh.
He gets the Rams. So decent, but it's the next 2 games though. You ready for this? He goes back to back with the New York Jets and the San Francisco 49ers.
Oh, gross.
Trade him after this week. Trade him because even guess who his opponent is after this week? Dallas.
Gosh. Yeah, no.
Sell him. But anyway, back to this week for Sam Howell. He's a start this week. I mean,
sure.
3 straight weeks with over 300 passing yards. He has 8 total touchdowns over the last 3 weeks too. He's giving you little to no reason to not keep him in your lineup at this point.
Definitely. And then Brian Robinson, the running back for the Giants, running back 4 on the season. How about this Washington team just putting up some they're gross on their way to the top. I mean, obviously, like I said, it helps. They haven't had their bye. He's not, running back 4 points per game. But man, would you start Brian? You're not starting him in this game.
No.
Real. Explain.
New York, the Giants version. They are bottom half of the league in fantasy points allowed to running backs over the last 4 weeks. They've been better against the run. They're allowing the 7th fewest yards per carry on the 11th most attempts over that stretch. So teams are trying to run the ball on them, and they are shutting it down. Do not get fooled by, oh my gosh, 119 receiving yards. Wow. That's not happening again. Mm-hmm. Okay. That is not Brian Robinson's game. Okay.
More than he had all last year.
Jeez.
It is. He had 87 receiving yards last year.
It's just gross. Don't start him this week. The matchup isn't there. You've got better options at running back.
Well,
yes. Well,
you want to look at my dynasty team? Because I can guarantee I do not.
Never mind.
But yes, I would agree. He's probably a lower running back too this week. However, every time we say that about Brian Robinson, he decides.
Well, actually, if you're jinxing it, yes, continue saying what you're saying.
He just, especially if I jump on like anti-Brian Robinson this week, he pops off. So I'm staying away from telling you to sit him, but listen to Ty.
Read between the lines, people.
Read between the lines. All right, next one, we got Tampa Bay at San Francisco. Your obvious starts in this one. Mike Evans, CMC, Kittle, Rashad White. I know it's a bad matchup, but after what he's done the last couple of weeks, you have to start Rashad White. And it does help that most of his points comes through the receiving game, right? So even if he could run the ball 11 times for 22 yards and still end up with 15 fantasy points, because that's just how Rashad White games go. Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, I would start both of them, especially after what we saw last week. There's not really a good sit in this game, though. I put Cade Otton down just in case you're considering it, because San Francisco has been a top 8 team against the tight end position. But, outside, we've listed pretty much all the players who are, going to be decent for fantasy. I guess Brock Purdy, Baker Mayfield, if you want to, if you're looking for a streaming option, Brock Purdy could be one you throw in. Baker could, as well. Both have been playing right around that, running back or quarterback 9 to 12 range. Ty, you look like you have something you want to add on the quarterbacks quick.
My concern is Baker. How does he handle the pressure that's going to be thrown his way? It affected Trevor Lawrence. That's my concern. And that also kind of makes me concerned for the start. And I'll let you talk about the start, because for the same reason that I have concerns for Mayfield is what's causing concern for this player for me.
So over the last 5 weeks, San Francisco has given up 41.1 fantasy points to the wide receiver position. So I have Chris Godwin as my start. San Francisco is also allowing, I think it's the 3rd most points to the slot. Godwin's playing about 30 to 50% of his snaps in the slot. And actually, the reason you're worried about Baker is because of the pressure. That's one of the reasons I think Godwin could be all right this game, is more underneath routes from Godwin. Quicker routes, Baker might look his way more, but it's still Baker Mayfield. Just because typical quarterbacks are going to do that doesn't necessarily mean Baker will.
I feel like the best way to talk about not even the best. The expectation that you can have for Buccaneers wide receivers this week is that if they both do well and Baker isn't fazed by the pressure, Mike Evans is going to do better, but Chris Godwin can do okay. But if pressure gets to Baker Mayfield, both are just going to dud out this week.
For sure. No, and that makes total sense. I don't think there's too much more to add on that. That one's a pretty straightforward fantasy matchup. Next, back into the divisional matchups, we got the Jets at Buffalo with no more Ken Dorsey. Does that mean we're worried about Josh Allen? Absolutely not. You start him. You start Stephon Diggs. You start Dalton Kincaid. Tyler, are you questioning starting Dalton Kincaid this week? Or
so I will say this. Shameless plug. We have a Star Set channel over on our Chalkboard page where you can ask how many people are on our page. There's over 3,000 people, I think there is.
Pushing 4.
Yeah, we're pushing 4,000. Hey, how about that? So, hey, it's absolutely free. And you've got trade advice, you got weekly rankings, start sets, all the sorts. So link for that will be in the description. But anyway, there was a question that someone threw out there for starts and sits, and they said, do I start Dalton Kincaid or do I start Sam Laporta? And for me, that was an easy Laporta one, because you could think about it in the scenario of, well, Sam Laporta is Sam Laporta, and at least with, at least having Sam Laporta, you can afford to sit Dalton Kincaid to see how that week goes.
Mhm.
And I think I think that's true for most tight ends this week when compared to Dalton Kincaid. But I think if you are, if Dalton Kincaid is your only one, I feel like you still have to, but I feel like you have to at least realize that there is a pretty low floor for him this week in case there is some change in the way that plays are called or whatever, for whatever reason, there is a lower floor for Dalton Kincaid this week.
No, that makes sense. But for me, I'm still excited about Dalton Kincaid. I still want him moving forward. I think he's pushing top 6 tight end rest this season. I think him and Trey McBride are going to be very close to kind of the same tier moving forward. It does sound gross, but at the same time, volume's going to be, especially for McBride, is going to be impeccable. I think Kincaid's a little more talented of a receiver. Then on the Jets side, you're obviously starting Garrett Wilson. That volume has been absolutely nuts for a couple of weeks now. And then you got to start Breece Hall again. We saw Javonte have a pretty decent week last week against the Bills. They haven't been great at stopping the run. Breece needs to get back on track. And then there's not really another start. I think Kincaid kind of fell into that. But the sit, I'm going to go with Gabe. Ooh, who do you got? Oh, James Cook. We didn't talk about James Cook. I completely forgot about him. Let's talk about James Cook quick. I forgot to put him in the doc. That is my bad. Obviously benched for the first quarter and a half last week after his fumble, but ended up with over 100 yards. Had one of the craziest plays in the second. Did you see where he was running down the field?
Well, yeah.
Just drops the ball, picks it right back up, and keeps going like it never even happened. Then he got caught from behind like a nerd.
Yeah, who gets caught from behind like that? Jeez.
Unbelievable. Are you starting James Cook this week? How are you feeling? How confident are you in starting James Cook?
Not very confident.
That's kind of how I feel.
He feels like I think he also has a pretty high ceiling, but a pretty low floor as well. We don't know what this offense is going to look like next week, and for all we know, is this the game where we see Leonard Fournette kind of take over? Maybe.
Yeah.
And
caller.
Right. Yeah. I don't feel like this is a great one. Even if the matchup is there against the Jets, I just need to see a week.
Yep. And then you got Gabe Davis. He's the only other person we're talking. I would sit Gabe Davis, 0 points, 9 points the last 2 weeks. Jets are the best defense in the league against fantasy wide receivers over the season, over the last 4 games. It doesn't matter. But at the same time, it is the 3rd week of he's going on these three-week cycles. If you look at his stats, it's 20 points every 3 weeks. This is the 3rd week. So now that I'm telling you to sit, maybe you should. If you start him, I'm not.
Fade Cam, guys.
But I told you to sit him 3 weeks ago. He popped out for 20 points. So if you start him and he does well, you can thank me. If you sit him and listen to me and he does bad, you can thank me. If anything else happens, that's on you. At this point, that's kind of what we're going to go at it with Gabe Davis.
Yeah.
You know who Gabe Davis is at this point. If you're starting him, you know exactly who he is. Ty, you'll never guess it, but we got another divisional matchup here. Seattle at the Rams. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. And I think Kenneth Walker still is a guy that you got to start just because you probably don't have any other options, although he was a sell second out of our last 3 weeks on my YouTube video that comes out. I want to talk about real quick the Seattle wide receivers because people have no idea what to do with them anymore. Last 3 weeks, JSN, 3 catches of 4 targets, 36 yards, and touchdown. 6 catches on 7 targets, 63 yards. 4 catches on 5 targets for 53 yards. DK Metcalf. These are some wild from DK. 5 receptions on 14 targets for 67 yards. Then he goes 1 catch on 4 targets for 50 yards. And then he goes 7 catches on 12 targets for 98 yards. What? That doesn't even make sense. Gross. And then Lockett, 8 catches on
8 catches for 91 yards.
91 yards. I forgot to put targets on that one. And a tutty. 3 catches then on 8 targets. I should have written this out. I have this in chicken scratch on here for 32 yards. And then this last week again, 8 catches, 92 yards, and a tutty. Like, do we start Lockett? Is DK cooked? Do we follow the volume with DK? Is JSN going to pop off? What is going on with these Seattle wide receivers?
Enough to sell them if you have any shares of them. Like, the only one that I'm interested in rostering is JSN because there's a low risk but a high reward with him.
For sure.
Everyone else, DK, Tyler Lockett, I'm trying to sell. I don't want any shares of them because you can't predict it. You can't predict what this Seattle offense is going to do outside of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, and even that's starting to get a little more cloudy moving forward. On the other side of the ball, Kyron Williams coming back this week. Obviously coming out of the IR, nobody's for sure yet. He was running back 4 in his last game. And Seattle's given him 28.1 fantasy points to running backs over the last 5. And yet I think you should sell him if you can before the week starts. And I'm not exactly excited about starting him. I mean, he's a 195-pound running back who are just coming off an ankle injury. They have Henderson and Freeman on the team who are by no means great. Like, let's get that straight. They're averaging like 3 yards per carry each. But I don't think he's going to see 20 rush attempts again like he had been. His volume, he had seen 2 targets in the 2 games after Kupp had returned, so his receiving volume was way down. Ty, would you start Kyron Williams this week, or how are you feeling about that?
I think if you start Kyron Williams, your hope is that he's still just a volume hog, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's your only hope. If he splits carries with Darrell Henderson, there is just zero value. Or I shouldn't say zero. There's not as much value as there was before he got injured. That's why he's a sell. That's why he's a sell.
For sure. All righty. Now we got our Sunday Night Football and a Monday Night Football game. Sunday Night Football is a little less exciting unless maybe you're us than the Monday Night Football game. But we got Minnesota at Denver. The potential return of Justin Jefferson, who you are for sure starting if he comes back. TJ Hawkinson, with the way he's been playing with Josh Dobbs, he might be tight end 1 rest of the season if he keeps this up with Dobbs. Javonte Williams, you got to start with the volume he's been getting as of late. Cortland Sutton, I think, is on that edge of. I mean, we keep saying he's touchdown dependent, but he doesn't stop scoring. And he had 8 catches last week. So I guess Cortland Sutton, he's probably close to that Tyler Boyd range. Honestly, is where he should be. I don't know if we'll rank him there, but that's probably where he should be. The 2 wide receivers, though, I do want to talk about in this one: Jordan Addison and Jerry Jeudy. Because we're going to talk about Jordan Addison right now from the aspect of Justin Jefferson is returning. If Jefferson is back, Denver's been better over the last 5 games against wide receiver position. They're actually giving up the 6th least amount of yards to wide receivers over the last 5 games. So Ty, are you starting Jordan Addison if Jefferson plays? Is it dependent on it? If you're a little hurting for a wide receiver, or is he locked and loaded?
I think the difference for Jordan Addison compared to some of the other receivers that we've talked about is really like who else? If Jefferson plays, who else? And, because then you're looking at guys like Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy, who's in this game as well, Gabe Davis, George Pickens. Like, if it's not Addison, then who? That's what I keep coming back to. So even if Jefferson plays, yes, he's then kind of a low end flex, low end wide receiver 3. If he doesn't play, I still don't feel super great because then he draws Patrick Surtain, who has just blanketed guys this year.
Yes.
But I feel like you still have to play. You just got to temper your expectations a bit.
Yeah. And then just real quick, Jerry Jeudy's been disappointing this year. Do you have any interest in starting him this week?
Nope.
Yeah, and I think I agree. The last person I will throw in here is if Alexander Madison doesn't play, Ty Chandler. Are you interested in digging in that barrel, or do you think there's better ways to go?
Well, let's see. How's Denver been doing against the run lately?
They've actually been better. They're giving up. Never mind. They're giving up 6 yards per carry still to running backs.
Oh, well.
So if Madison plays, you start him. If Ty Chandler plays, you probably start Ty Chandler this week.
Well, here's the thing, though. The Vikings are not great at running the ball just yet.
They aren't. That's true.
So even with a matchup against Denver,
are you staying away from Ty Chandler if he starts? Brian Robinson or Ty Chandler?
Oh, no. I'm not.
Okay.
No.
So that's the realm at least.
That's the realm.
Right.
That's the realm.
So the people know. But yeah, I think we'll just kind of leave it at that.
You know what? I feel like you have to play either one of them. I mean, if James Cook can do what he did in just 2 quarters,
yeah,
they are still leaky enough to feel somewhat okay with one of them. But if Madison plays, and Madison's the guy, Ty Chandler is not.
Yeah.
Ty Chandler should be the guy then if Madison doesn't play. I think that's where I stand.
I would agree with that. And then we got the Monday Night Football game, which should be the most exciting game of the week.
You know what this means?
It means it's going to be like a 13-6 game, and it's going to be disgusting.
Exactly.
But it's Philly at Kansas City. It's the Super Bowl rematch. Man, you got to be starting Hurts. Swift probably still start. I mean, AJ Brown for sure, Mahomes, Kelsey, and then probably Devonta Smith as well with no Dallas Goedert. We've talked about Devonta a lot, how we talked about in the last episode, so won't talk about him too much here. But your guy, man, Isaiah Pacheco, this is a gross matchup for him. He's got a lot of green coming up if you look at his schedule over on Sleeper rest of the season. But Ty, are you willing to throw him into the fire here, or are you staying away from Pacheco?
You might have to play him just because of what we've seen so far this year, but you feel gross about it just because it's Philly, and Philly does not allow teams to run the ball ever at all. With Pacheco, we kind of saw the floor for him the last 2 weeks before their bye. He finishes a running back 39 and the running back 34. That's his floor. And I think that's a very, very realistic outcome for him this week. I think we let's determine the range that he probably finishes this week with a little name game. Let's start with guys that we expect to finish above him.
All right.
Tony Pollard.
Yep.
Kenneth Walker.
Mm-hmm.
Rashad White.
Yep.
Jerome Ford.
Yeah, I think I'd lean Ford.
James Conner.
I'd lean Conner as well.
Now this is where it starts to get gross. Kyron Williams.
I think I'm going to go Pacheco.
James Cook.
I'd probably go Cook there.
3 more for you. Brian Robinson.
I'm going to go Pacheco.
Gus Edwards.
Oh, wow. I'm going to go Pacheco as well.
Keaton Mitchell.
I'm going to go Pacheco.
So it is that low end running back 2 range.
Yep.
And you just don't feel confident at all with it.
Yep. And then, Philly's been great against the run. They haven't been good against the pass. They're giving the 4th most the most fantasy points wide receivers per game of the last 4 weeks. So is there anyone in this Kansas City wide receiver room that you're interested in this week, Ty?
Well,
is there anyone in this? That was like a jump.
I got you.
I'm glad you got me. Thank you.
Mr. Rashee Rice.
Ooh.
I don't see why not. I mean, he is the wide receiver 1 based on fantasy points from the Chiefs. And he gets a great matchup against Philly. They're allowing the most fantasy points to wide receivers. I mean, throughout the year, it feels like they have yet to slow down a wide receiver. Yes, they slow down Tyreek to a certain extent, but that was one game. They're allowing the most receptions, the most yards, the most touchdowns per game. Like, I think yes, Kelsey could have a day, but I also think Rashee Rice will be able to contribute, especially if they're not able to run the ball.
For sure. And I agree completely with that. So, Ty, let's dip into a little bit of full fellas fade here. Why don't we? All righty, Ty, kick us off. I gotta say, I like yours pick a little more than I like mine. But that's because I was at the bottom of the barrel. Because when I made my pick, there was like 7 lines out. So Ty, why don't you kick us off here?
Derrick Henry. Kim, you foreshadowed him a little bit when we touched on that Tennessee-Jacksonville game, but Derrick Henry, 54.5 rushing yards over on Underdog Fantasy. Use the code fellas, get first deposit match up to $100. To find this Derrick Henry line of 54.5 rushing yards, I love it against Jacksonville, and we all know that Derrick Henry destroys AFC South opponents. Yes, the Colts only held him to 40-something yards in their matchup earlier this year. That's one game. This is the first time that Jacksonville and Tennessee are matching up, and that's what I care about. Last year was Doug Peterson's first year as head coach of the Jaguars, and Derrick Henry ran for over 100 yards both times, averaged 115 yards, and he has gone over, 70 rushing yards, 80 rushing yards in each of the last 6 games against Jacksonville. I don't think that Jacksonville is going to get, I feel like the reason why this line is so low is because people think that Jacksonville will get ahead quick and the Tennessee abandons the run a little bit. I don't think so. I think this game is going to be a little bit closer than people think. That's why that gives me confidence for Derrick Henry to go higher than 54.5 rushing yards.
Sound effect took a second to load, but it was there. I do got to say, I like that one. He's pretty much either 20 yards or he's over this line, and he's only done the 20-yard thing twice. So not banking on it happening 2 weeks in a row. My pick is pretty much the same line, 55.5 rushing yards. I'm going to take Austin Eckler higher than 55.5 rushing yards. Packers are giving up 100 rush yards a game over their last 5. And Eckler's averaging 15 carries a game since coming back. So he's been getting the carries. The efficiency has just been terrible. He has yet to have a game where he's averaging over 4 yards per carry. I think Green Bay might be the perfect one to kind of get that going. Packers are only allowing about 4.1 yards per carry, but still, if he has 15 carries, he hits 4.1 yards per carry. We got 60 yards and a higher. He did it last week. I think he could definitely do it again this week. So I'm going to take Austin Eckler higher than 55.5 rushing yards. Oh, I love that. We need a little like thing that comes up to like show.
Yeah, right. Locked in.
But yeah, with that, we kept this right around an hour for you guys. So that's pretty good to get through 14 matchups. Do for the people. That's why we do it. But yeah, let's go win some championships, right? That's what we're gearing up for right now. We're getting ready for those playoffs. Trade deadlines are closing down. So if you need some trade targets, go check out my YouTube video. Waiver wire is always important, right? I mean, we saw that with Amon-Ra a couple of years ago. Rashad Penny, Keaton Mitchell could be that guy this year, right? That you're scooping up. So make sure you check out Ty's videos on Monday. And Lucas, when you're looking for those last little must starts, a little bit of extra help, go check out Lucas's video coming out tomorrow. But yeah, we got so much content. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube, hit those notification buttons. Ty's got a quick plug for us.
Yeah, make sure you're subscribed, have the notification bell turned on, because we also go live on Sunday mornings before kickoff to answer all of the last minute questions you may have as well. You will be notified when we go live if you have that notification bell turned on. So have that turned on and be subscribed to join us on Sunday mornings.
Yes, we love it. We go TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube.
We go triple box.
We are amazing.
I was going with Scott Hansen impression. We're going to go triple box here.
We got 7 teams in the red zone. I don't even know what to do. Gotta love it. Gotta love us some NFL red zone. Gotta love some start sits. Gotta love us some fantasy football. But that wraps us up for us at Fantasy Football Fellas on YouTube and TikTok, at the FFLs on Instagram, at FFLs on Twitter. Tyler's at Tyler_Plath, and I am at Camla FFF. So make sure you go give us a follow. And Lucas will see you tomorrow, and then we will see you again next week. Deuces.